While relatives whispered I needed to lose 30 pounds for the wedding photos, I was checking a $3,900 hotel bill from a bathtub. That was the price I paid to miss my sister's wedding. They thought I'd show up smaller. I chose to disappear entirely. The only question left is, who do you root for? The perfect bride, or the sister who paid $3,900 just to not show up? My name is Hayden Willis. I am just shy of 30, working as a financial analyst in Chicago. And on that Sunday, I was pointing my car north. I left the concrete canyons of the Loop and aimed for the quiet, manicured lawns of Appleton, Wisconsin. It was a 2.5-hour drive, a familiar pilgrimage for what my mother, Elaine, had cheerfully termed an intimate family lunch in the Willis family. Intimate was a code word. It meant mandatory. It meant you were about to be evaluated. I pulled onto the familiar street, a row of perfect houses sitting behind perfect, aggressively green lawns. My parents' home was the archetype. It was not just a house, it was a statement of control. It was a standing rebuke to the very concept of entropy. I knew, as I parked, that the front door would be unlocked. Elaine Willis insisted on it during visiting hours, ringing the doorbell. She had explained countless times. Shatters the atmosphere. The truth, I always suspected, was that she disliked the intrusion. The implication that someone was outside her sphere of influence and had to ask for entry. The dining room was already visible from the entryway. It was set for a catalog shoot. The heavy mahogany table, which could seat 12, was laid out with the good china and silver. Even though there were only 5 of us scheduled, the white linen tablecloth was so flat and taut it looked like a sheet of ice, not a single crease. My mother did not tolerate creases. I arrived at 12:45, exactly 15 minutes early. This was the sweet spot I had calculated over years of visits. Arriving on time meant you were disrespectful of her preparation. Arriving 30 minutes early meant you were in the way. 15 minutes early was the perfect balance of eager and respectful. I had also dressed with calculated precision. My armor for these visits was a dark navy silk blouse. It was expensive, which would please my mother's eye, but cut generously, designed to flow and skim rather than cling. It was my "please do not comment on my body" uniform. It was an attempt to preemptively neutralize the battlefield. It failed, as it always did. Elaine emerged from the kitchen, wiping her bone-dry hands on a starched white apron that was cleaner than any item of clothing I owned. "Hayden, you're here." Her smile was bright and brittle, and then, the ritual. I called it the scan. Her eyes started at my hair, which I had gotten professionally blown out the day before. Good. They moved to the silk blouse. Acceptable. Then, they dropped. They paused. Just for a fraction of a second, but long enough for the message to be transmitted. They rested on my stomach. They lingered on my hips. The smile on her face never wavered, but the verdict was delivered. The word was unspoken, but I heard it anyway. Still. "Rob, Hayden's here," she called out, turning back to the kitchen. My father, Robert Willis, materialized from his study. His reading glasses were perched on his head, and his phone was already in his hand, a permanent extension of his body. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his eyes flicking up from the screen for exactly 1 second. "Good drive?" "Fine, Dad. You?" "Can't complain." He gave my mother's shoulder a perfunctory pat, and then drifted toward the living room sofa, his thumb already scrolling. My father was a man of strategic retreat. He was the master of the fortress of silence, a safe place he could withdraw to the moment my mother's voice acquired its specific, high-frequency edge of disapproval. He had chosen peace over partnership sometime in the late 90s, and he had never looked back. We were barely settled when the front door opened again, this time with a gust of perfume and energy. My sister, Maddie did not just enter a room, she made an entrance. She was a whirlwind of bright, blonde hair and perfect teeth. She was wearing a cream-colored knit dress that clung to every single curve she had spent a lifetime cultivating and I had spent a lifetime accumulating. She was the finished product. I was the flawed draft. Holding her hand, looking vaguely amused by the entire domestic scene, was Evan Calloway. Evan was precisely the man you expected Maddie to be with. He looked like he had been assembled by a committee of marketing executives. His jaw was sharp, his hair was perfectly windswept, and he wore a casual blazer over a t-shirt with an air of practiced indifference. He had the face of a man on the cover of a financial magazine, the kind who talked about disruption and leveraging assets. "Mommy!" Maddie shrieked, embracing Elaine. "Evan, look, isn't the table gorgeous?" "Beautiful, Elaine," Evan said, his voice smooth. We moved to the table. The meal was predictable. A light chicken salad with microgreens and asparagus spears aligned with geometric precision. The conversation, also predictable, was the Maddie Show. We heard, in excruciating detail, about Maddie's brilliant new marketing campaign for a boutique gin company. We heard about the condo they were closing on in Milwaukee, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the rooftop pool. We heard about their potential honeymoon plans, Tuscany, maybe, or a safari in Botswana. The financial analyst who had, just the previous week, successfully navigated a hostile portfolio merger worth north of $50 million, was asked exactly 2 questions. The first was from my mother. "Hayden, darling, just a splash of dressing for you, right?" The second was from Evan. "So, Hayden, still doing the numbers in Chicago?" "Something like that," I replied, forcing a smile. "That's great. That's just great," he nodded, satisfied that the requisite gap in conversation had been filled, and immediately turned back to Maddie. "Babe, tell your mom about the infinity pool. I just ate my asparagus, 1 spear at a time." Finally, as Elaine brought out a guilt-free angel food cake, a dessert that was mostly air and disappointment, Maddie stood up. She tapped her water glass with a manicured fingernail. The sound was a sharp tink, tink, tink. My father actually put his phone down. "So," Maddie beamed, her eyes sparkling, "Evan and I have a little announcement." Elaine gasped, her hand flying to her chest in a flawless pantomime of surprise. "We're engaged!" The room erupted. Elaine let out a high, triumphant shriek. My father boomed, "Well, it's about time," and rose to shake Evan's hand vigorously. "Maddie, oh my God, congratulations," I said, a genuine, uncomplicated wave of happiness rising in my chest for her. "Evan, that's wonderful." But my voice was swallowed. Elaine was already crushing Maddie in a hug, weeping onto the shoulder of her expensive dress. My father was pounding Evan on the back. I just sat there, smiling, a spectator at the edge of the emotional blast radius. After the ring was admired, it was enormous, a blinding, cushion-cut diamond that looked heavy, and after Maddie had recounted the proposal story in breathless, cinematic detail, it involved a hot air balloon at sunrise. "Just like a movie," she clarified. The energy finally began to settle. Then, Maddie turned to me. Her face was flush with excitement. She gave me that smile. It was a smile I had known since childhood. It was the smile that always appeared right before she asked for something she knew she shouldn't. It was the smile she used when she borrowed my 10th grade history paper. It was the smile she wore when she convinced me to take the blame for the vase she broke. It was a brutal, manipulative smile, perfectly packaged in sisterly affection. "Hayden," she said, her voice dropping into a register of profound, fake intimacy. "Obviously, you're going to be my maid of honor." A tiny, stupid flicker of warmth ignited in my chest. Maid of honor. Me. Not one of her countless, skinny sorority sisters. Me. The first choice. I barely had time to register the feeling before she continued. "But," she said, the smile tightening just a fraction, "there is one condition." The warmth died. She leaned forward, as if sharing a secret, though everyone at the table was listening intently. "I need you to lose weight, at least 35 pounds. She laughed. It was a light, tinkling, social sound, as if she had just made a delightful joke about the weather. She continued, I cannot have people whispering at my wedding that the bride's sister is bigger than the actual wedding dress. The silence that fell on the table was absolute. It was so cold and so total that I could feel the blood draining from my face. The air pressure in the room changed. I looked at my mother, pleading. Elaine just nodded slowly, thoughtfully, as if Maddie had raised a very practical, very reasonable logistical point. "She's right, honey," Elaine said, her voice soft and full of concern. "It's about the overall image. The photographs last forever. You'll thank her later." I looked at my father. I saw his mouth open. I saw the flicker of protest in his eyes, the beginning of a defense. He started to say, "Maddie, that's not—" He stopped. He had caught Elaine's gaze. It was a look of pure, concentrated warning, a silent, steel command. My father's mouth snapped shut. He looked down. He picked up his phone. He physically turned his body away, retreating into the digital fortress. The drawbridge was up. He was gone. Evan, the financial magazine cover, was suddenly fascinated by the crumb structure of his angel food cake. All eyes were back on me. I was trapped. The rage felt like swallowing hot tar. It burned all the way down my throat and settled, heavy and toxic, in my stomach. I tried to keep my voice from shaking. I'll consider it." "Consider it?" Maddie's sweet, bridal voice evaporated. It was replaced by the clipped, efficient tone she used with her assistants. "Hayden, this isn't a suggestion. It's a requirement. I want my wedding day to be perfect. You have 6 months." She smiled, turning away from me and back to Evan, the performance complete. "Now, who wants coffee?" I don't remember the rest of the lunch. I don't remember how I left. I think I mumbled something about traffic, about an early meeting on Monday. I got into my car, the navy silk blouse suddenly feeling like a suffocating straitjacket. I made it onto the highway, heading south. I drove for an hour, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The tears didn't start until I crossed the Illinois state line. They were not quiet, dignified tears. They were the ugly, gulping, gasping sobs of someone who had just realized she was 30 years old and still letting these people treat her like a problem to be solved. Why did I keep going back? Why did I keep driving all that way? Just to be inspected and weighed and measured, only to be told, again, that I was not enough? That in the story of this family, I was nothing but Maddie's flawed, oversized, embarrassing draft. I wiped my face, the anger finally burning through the shame. A requirement. A new thought, cold and hard and sharp, planted itself in my gut. This was a game with rules they had written, a game I had been losing my entire life. What if, this time, I didn't play? What if I took their rules, and their requirements, and their overall image, and I simply refused? What if, for the first time, I set the terms myself? My apartment in Chicago has always been my sanctuary. I walked in, dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, and let the silence of the 40th floor wash over me. The drive home had been a blur of rage and road hypnosis. Now, I was back. My space is the antithesis of my mother's home, where hers is fussy, cluttered with porcelain and polished mahogany. Mine is minimalist, steel, glass, and neutral tones. My bookshelf is not decorative. It's functional, crammed with financial textbooks, binders on market analysis, and economic theory. On the wall, instead of awkward family portraits, hang 2 framed awards, one for Top Analyst Under 30 from my firm, Northline Capital Partners, and my degree from Northwestern. These are the artifacts of my real life, the life that, back in Appleton, gets reduced to still doing the numbers. I sat on my sleek, low-profile sofa, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading, leaving behind the familiar, cold ache of shame. I had let it happen again. I had let them reduce me to a physical problem that needed solving. But this time, the anger didn't fade with the shame. It crystallized. It turned into something cold and hard. It turned into the one thing I was truly good at: analysis. I opened my laptop, went past the spreadsheets and market projections, and clicked on a folder I rarely opened. It was labeled, simply, Family. I clicked, and I started to scroll, not as a daughter, but as an auditor. There were hundreds of photos, spanning 2 decades, birthdays, holidays, random summer barbecues. As I clicked through them, one by one, a pattern emerged. It was not a coincidence, it was a system. Christmas, 2018. The whole family in front of the tree. Maddie is front and center, arm looped through Evan's, head tilted, radiant. Elaine and Rob are on either side of her, and there I am, on the far left, partially obscured by a large, festive poinsettia. Maddie's high school graduation, Maddie in her cap and gown, center frame. I am standing next to her, but the photo is cropped aggressively at my shoulder. Only half of my face is visible, as if I were a photobomber, an accidental inclusion. Thanksgiving, 2021. A group shot on the porch. Maddie is, again, center. I am in the back row, standing behind my much shorter mother, my body almost entirely eclipsed. The evidence was damning, and as I looked at the images, the soundtrack of my life, the audio files that went with the pictures, started playing in my head. Hayden, sweetheart, just move back a little. Maddie needs the light. Can you stand behind your sister? Just to make the frame look balanced. Hayden, let's have you take the picture. You're so good with the camera. It was never, you are fat. It was always, you are inconvenient. You are visually disruptive. You are a problem for the composition. You are a risk to the overall image. I closed the folder, a cold sickness rising in my throat. I stood up and walked to my bedroom closet. In the back, on the top shelf, was a shoebox. Inside, beneath old report cards and a dried-up corsage, were my high school diaries. I pulled one out, the one with the flimsy brass lock that I had prized. I opened it. My handwriting was round, adolescent, full of angst. I flipped through, looking for a specific memory. I found it. Junior year, prom. April 10th. Mom came into my room tonight while I was trying on my dress. It's navy blue. I really liked it. She just stared at it for a minute and said, Hayden, have you considered a fast? I asked what she meant. She said if I just did a liquid diet for 3 weeks, just 3, the dress would drape so much better. She said I would look clean. I told her I was hungry. She said, hungry is just a feeling, but pictures are forever. I shut the book, my fingers shaking, the word clean, as if I were in my current state. Dirty. I grabbed another diary, senior year. March 2nd. I got it. I got the full ride to Northwestern. I ran downstairs screaming. I called Mom at her office. I told her, Mom, I got the full scholarship. There was a pause. Her first words, her very first words were not, congratulations. They were not, I'm so proud of you. Her first words were, oh, honey, that's wonderful. Now, have you lost any weight? I dropped the book. It hit the floor with a dull thud. That was it. That was the moment the analyst in my brain took over completely. I looked at the data points, collected over 20 years. Fact. Every single intellectual, academic, or professional achievement of mine was immediately and systematically deflected and minimized by redirecting the conversation to my physical appearance. Fact. Every single family event was architected to place Maddie at the center and me at the margins. Fact. I had been conditioned, over 2 decades, to believe that my primary value in the family unit was not my intelligence, my loyalty, or my character, but my composability, my ability to fit, to be small, to not disrupt the picture. I walked into my bathroom and stood in front of the full-length mirror. I looked. I really, truly looked. I did not see what my mother saw. I did not see what Maddie saw. I did not see a problem. I saw a body that was strong, a body that carried me through 4 years of a rigorous university education, A body that endured 80-hour work weeks. A body that was healthy, that hiked, that swam. I saw a body that had earned me the right to live in this beautiful, expensive apartment in this vibrant, difficult city. This body was not a liability. It was the engine of my success. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The problem is not my weight. The problem is the system of power in my family. My weight is just the weapon they use to enforce it. It is the tool they use to keep me in my place, to remind me that no matter how much I achieve, I will always be the before picture, and Maddie will always be the after. The anger that had been simmering since Appleton finally cooled, it settled into something sharp, clear, and bright. It settled into resolve. If I lost those 35 pounds, I knew, with absolute certainty, what would happen. It wouldn't be enough. It would be, "You look better, Hayden, but now we must do something about your hair." Or, "You look thinner, but that color makes you look washed out." Or, "You did well, but you're still not as polished as Maddie." They would just move the goalposts, because the goal was not my health. The goal was my compliance. I would never, ever be good enough for Elaine's picture-perfect scenario. I went back to my laptop. I closed the diary folders. I opened a new, blank Excel spreadsheet. I typed a title into cell A1, Health Investment. My financial brain took over. I was done treating this like a family matter. I was going to treat it like a portfolio I was rebalancing. I was not going on a diet. I was divesting from their toxic assets and reinvesting in myself. I made a list. First, a full physical. Data acquisition. I needed a baseline. I went online and booked an appointment with a doctor for the following week. Second, exercise. I had been paying for a gym membership I never used. That was a sunk cost. I needed a strategy. I opened a browser tab. There was a private training studio near my office. I had looked at their website before, maybe 6 months ago. I had even saved the name of one of the trainers. Lena Cruz. I had hesitated for 6 months, always finding an excuse. It was too expensive. I was too busy. I was too intimidated. Now, I picked up my phone. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. A woman with a warm, no-nonsense voice answered. "Studio 3? This is Lena." My voice was shaking, just slightly. "Hi, Lena. My name is Hayden Willis. I'd like to book a consultation." "Great. Hayden, what are your goals? What are we working toward?" I took a deep breath. I thought of Maddie's requirement. I thought of my mother's overall image, and I thought of the diary entry about the scholarship. "I have an event in 6 months," I said, my voice steadying. "A wedding, and I'm going to be required to lose weight for it. But that's not the goal." "Okay," Lena said, her voice intrigued. "What is the goal?" "I don't want this journey to be about getting smaller for a wedding," I said, the words tasting strange and powerful on my tongue. "I want to be stronger. I want to be healthier. And I want to stop being controlled by my weight." There was a pause on the line. For a second, I thought she might laugh, or tell me she just counted reps. Then, Lena Cruz said the sentence that changed everything. "Perfect," she said. Her voice was suddenly bright. "That is the best goal I've heard all week. So here's our new rule. We'll treat the number on the scale as just one piece of data. Like a stock ticker. It's not good or bad. It just is. The real goal, the real win, the real goal is that in 6 months, you'll be able to set a boundary with absolutely anyone, and your hands won't even shake when you do it." I almost dropped the phone. We booked my first session. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a new journal, not a cheap, secret-keeping diary, but a clean, leather-bound moleskin. I didn't write about my feelings. I wrote a mission statement. I wrote, "The next 6 months are mine. The investment is in myself. And if, and only if, anyone gets to see the results, they will be seen on my terms, not theirs." My first session with Lena was a monument to my own self-neglect. It was not a glamorous Instagram filter experience. It was 55 minutes of awkward, clumsy, and painful reminders of every time I had chosen the elevator over the stairs. Lena, who was a compact, smiling woman with muscles that looked like they were carved from mahogany, was relentlessly cheerful. "Okay, Hayden, let's start with a basic bodyweight squat," she said, demonstrating a perfect, fluid motion. I tried, my knees protested, my back felt like a concrete slab. I went down about 3 inches and my body simply refused to cooperate. I panted. "This is just awful." "Yep," she said, still smiling. "Isn't it great? Your muscles are saying hello. Let's try again." Halfway through the session, during a plank that lasted approximately 11 seconds, I was on the verge of tears. I was paying a significant amount of money to be reminded of my own failures. I mumbled, "I really hate this." "I know you do," Lena said, not unkindly. "You hate it because it's hard. But you're here. You came back from that lunch. You made the call, and you're on the mat. The hardest part is already over. Give me 10 more seconds." I don't know why, but I did. I went back 2 days later, and 2 days after that, I kept going back. I kept going back because the day after that first session, I woke up with a feeling in my legs and my core. It wasn't pain, exactly. It was an activation. It was the feeling of sleeping muscles finally, angrily, waking up. It felt like an engine turning over for the first time in a decade. My doctor's appointment was sandwiched between a client meeting and another session with Lena. I sat on the crinkly paper, expecting the same lecture I had received my whole life. The "your BMI is in this category" speech. Dr. Eris, a woman I had never met before, just read my chart and listened. She ran a full panel. She checked my blood pressure. She asked about my work, my sleep, my stress levels. At the end, she took off her glasses and looked at me. "Hayden, your blood pressure is perfect. Your cholesterol is great. Your labs are, frankly, beautiful. You are not sick. You are not at high risk for anything. You are just tired, and you carry your stress physically. Your body isn't broken. It's just exhausted." I started to cry, right there, on the paper. A woman in a $3,000 suit, crying because a doctor didn't tell her she was a disaster. "You don't need a crash diet," she said gently. "You need more sleep, a little more movement, and to maybe eat some vegetables that weren't deep-fried. That's it. You're fine." That word, fine, felt revolutionary. Armed with this data, I changed my strategy at work. I was an analyst at Northline Capital Partners, a high-pressure, high-stakes firm where lunch was either a power play at a steakhouse or a sad desk salad inhaled from a plastic container. My default, more often than not, was the latter, or just grabbing a slice of pizza from the place downstairs. The following week, I started bringing my own lunch, the containers Lena had recommended: grilled chicken, quinoa, roasted broccoli. It wasn't sexy, but it was fuel. My cube mate, Brian, looked over at my Tupperware. "New leaf, Willis?" "Just a portfolio adjustment, Brian," I said. A week later, he said, "I don't know what's in that, but you seem less murdery in the 3 p.m. meetings." He was right. I did. The brain fog I had lived with for years, the fog I had attributed to my job, was lifting. I had a different kind of energy. It wasn't the jittery, caffeine-fueled panic of my colleagues. It was a low, steady burn. After 3 weeks, I stepped on the scale. The number Lena had called just a stock ticker was down 6 pounds. My favorite pair of jeans, the ones I'd relegated to the maybe one day section of my closet, slid on. They were snug, but they buttoned, without me having to lie down on the bed to do it. A small, genuine thrill went through me. But the real victory came that afternoon. I was at the gym with Lena, standing in front of the deadlift bar. "You're not going to like this," she warned. "I don't like any of this," I reminded her. "Today, we're going to try to lift something heavy." She put a weight on the bar that looked, to me, impossible. I looked at her. I looked at the bar. I thought about Maddie's requirement. "I can't lift that." "You don't know that," Lena said. "You haven't tried. Bend your knees. back straight, grip it, and just stand up. I did it. I gripped the bar. I braced my core, and I pushed the floor away with my feet. The weight left the ground. It was heavy, and it was hard, but it was up. I held it for a second, my entire body humming with the effort, and then I put it down. I had never, in my entire life, felt anything like it. It was not the flimsy, fleeting satisfaction of seeing a smaller number on the scale. This was real. This was power. I had done that. I looked at Lena, wide-eyed. She just grinned. See? Strong. That feeling, right there? That is the goal, not the genes. That night, I went home, took a sticky note, and wrote a sentence in black Sharpie. I stuck it on my bathroom mirror, right at eye level. No one gets to comment on my body, including me. The text messages, of course, had already started. They began as a trickle, then became a steady, insistent drip, all from Elaine. Maddie is looking at bridesmaid dresses. Honey, she needs your measurements. Have you started that diet? Just checking in. Hope you're making progress. 6 months goes by so fast. Hayden, I need you to send me a number. How many pounds have you lost? Maddie is getting anxious. For the first time in my life, I held back the data. I refused to let her see my numbers. I was managing my own portfolio now. She didn't get a seat on the board. My replies were polite, vague, and utterly unsatisfying. Hi, Mom. I'm focusing on my health right now. I'll let you know when I have an update. Don't worry about the dress. I'm sure we'll figure it out. I'm working with a professional. It's under control. This information embargo was a new move, and it was driving her insane. I could feel her frustration vibrating through the phone. I was supposed to be sending back tearful, detailed reports of my struggle and my progress, begging for her approval. Instead, I was giving her corporate speak. The détente lasted for another 2 weeks. Then came the mistake. It was a Tuesday night. I had just gotten home from the gym, my arms feeling like noodles from a new, evil exercise Lena had invented involving ropes. I was microwaving my sensible chicken and broccoli, scrolling through my phone. A text notification popped up. It wasn't from a single person. It was from a group chat. And it was a screenshot. My phone buzzed. The sender was my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. The text accompanying the screenshot was a single, horrified word. Elaine? I knew, instantly, that Aunt Linda had sent this to the wrong person. She had meant to send it to Elaine. She had, in her technological confusion, sent it to the main family chat, the chat that included me. I opened the image. It was a screenshot of another group chat, a secret one. The name at the top of the screen was Wedding Strategy. The participants were Elaine Willis, Maddie Willis, Aunt Linda, Aunt Carol. My heart stopped. I was not reading a text. I was looking at a classified document. I read the messages, my chicken growing cold in the microwave. Maddie, seriously, we need a contingency plan. If Hayden doesn't lose enough weight, we just put her at the back table. Minimal photos. I am not getting tagged next to her on Facebook for the rest of my life. It's embarrassing. Elaine, don't you worry. Darling, I'm encouraging her weekly. I'm managing the situation. We just have to control the risk factor at the wedding. She'll comply. She always does. Aunt Carol, poor thing. I know it's hard for her, but it's for the family's image. It's only right that she makes the effort. The pictures are forever. I sat down on my kitchen stool. My arms and legs, which had felt so strong and powerful just 10 minutes before, were completely numb. I was not a sister. I was not a daughter. I was a risk factor. I was a situation to be managed. I was an embarrassment to be hidden at a back table. All the work I had done, the sweat, the heavy lifting, the doctor's appointment, they thought it was all because they had pulled my strings, that I was complying, that I always do. I looked at the screenshot for a long, long time. The person who had existed before that lunch in Appleton would have burst into tears. She would have called her mother, sobbing, asking how could you? She would have imploded. I did not implode. The analyst in my brain, the cold, calculating part of me that I had built at Northline, took over. I did not cry. I did not scream. I calmly took my own screenshot of Aunt Linda's screenshot. I opened my laptop. I went to the family folder. I created a new subfolder. I named it Evidence. I saved the file. This time, I was not going to bury the data. I was not going to pretend it didn't exist. I was going to log it. Then, I opened my main family group chat, the one with Mom, Dad, Maddie, and me. The text from Aunt Linda was still hanging there, uncommented on, a digital bomb. My fingers were perfectly, completely steady. I remembered what Lena had said. The goal is that your hands won't even shake. I typed one sentence, one single, clean, devastating sentence. I have received the screenshot. I paused, then added the second part. From now on, I am getting healthy for me, not for any image strategy. I hit send. I watched. My father's name popped up. Rob is typing. The 3 dots flashed for a second, and then they vanished. My mother's name, Elaine, is typing. The dots flashed. They flashed again. They vanished. Maddie. Maddie is typing. Gone. No one replied, not a single person. The silence that followed was louder than any screaming match we had ever had. It was a week-long, deafening silence. But to me, it was something else. It was the sound of the game board being flipped. It was the first step in a hostile takeover, and I had just taken control of the narrative. The first 3 months were a honeymoon. The work was brutal, but the results were linear. I was the perfect client. I showed up. I listened to Lena. I ate the chicken and the broccoli. I drank the water, and the weight, the risk factor I had carried for so long, began to slide off. 18 pounds. It was not just the weight. It was everything. My sleep was deep and dreamless. My mind at work was a steel trap. I was closing deals. My analysis was sharper, and I had, as Brian noted, stopped being murdery in the afternoons. Then I hit the wall. For an analyst, I hated this part. I lived on data, and the data had stopped moving. For 3 solid weeks, the scale did not budge. It was not 1 pound up, 1 pound down. It was the same, precise, mocking number, 182 pounds. It was a 17-pound improvement, but it was not the 35-pound requirement. And just as that internal, old voice of failure began to whisper, the external voices returned. The week of digital silence after the evidence screenshot was over. My family had, apparently, regrouped. They had a new strategy. If the image strategy leak had failed, they would pivot to panic. My phone, which had been blissfully quiet, lit up. A text from Elaine. Hayden, I'm getting very nervous. It is only 3 months until the wedding. Maddie has to finalize the dress order. I trust you are still taking this seriously. A text from Maddie. 5 minutes later. I'm ordering the bridesmaid dresses today. I told the seamstress you would be a size 6. They only have one left in the coral. So I'm putting your name on it. Please don't make me have to change it. Hayden, don't make this difficult. Don't disappoint me. The words hit me like a physical slap. A size 6. It was not a question. It was not, what size are you now? It was an ultimatum. It was the goalpost. Set in stone. Mailed from Appleton. Don't disappoint me. The 3 words that had governed my entire childhood. The old panic, the one I thought I had deadlifted out of my system, came roaring back. My 18 pounds of progress felt like nothing. The new muscle I had built felt like a lie. I was still 182 pounds. I was not a size 6. I was a failure. I was sitting at my desk at Northline the next day, trying to focus on a derivatives model, but all I could see was that size 6 tag. My instant messenger pinged. It was Sarah from the marketing department. Hey, her message read, you have been looking amazing lately. Seriously, whatever you're doing, it's working. I just found this insane new program. My cousin in LA did it and she looks like a different person. You should totally check it out. A link followed. I clicked it. The screen exploded in my face, bright pink and yellow text. The 21-day metamorphosis. Beneath it, a promise in a font so large it felt like it was screaming at me. Lose 20 pounds in just 21 days, guaranteed. There were the pictures, the ubiquitous before and after shots, a woman looking pale, bloated, and miserable, and next to her, the after shot, the same woman, tan, ecstatic, in a tiny bikini. 20 pounds, 21 days. I did the math, my analyst brain, which had been frozen, suddenly whirred to life, but in the wrong direction. I was stuck at 17 pounds. This program promised 20 more. I could be down 37 pounds. I could be done. I could beat Maddie's goal with time to spare. I scrolled down. The price was $999. A small price to pay for a new life. The website cooed. I closed my derivatives model. I could not focus. I went home early, claiming a migraine. That night, I sat on my sofa. My apartment was dark, the only light coming from the glowing, aggressive pink of the Metamorphosis sales page on my laptop. I opened my wallet. I took out my American Express card. I placed it on the coffee table next to my trackpad. My hand was sweating. I could feel a damp, clammy patch on my palm. All I had to do was type in the numbers. $999, 3 weeks, and this would all be over. I could almost feel the relief of it, the sweet, sweet release of just being done. I imagined walking into that church. I imagined the scale finally moving. I imagined the look on Maddie's face. Then I imagined the alternative. I kept doing what I was doing. I stayed at 182 pounds. I showed up, a failure. I saw the quick, pitying glances from my aunts. I saw the disappointment in Elaine's eyes. And worse, I saw Maddie's sigh. That short, sharp exhalation of breath that meant I gave you a chance, and you let me down. You are, and always will be, the risk factor. The shame was a physical weight, heavier than any barbell Lena had ever put on my back. I could not bear it. My finger moved toward the trackpad, toward the bright, shiny button that said, "Buy now and change your life." My phone buzzed on the table. It lit up. A video call. Lena Cruz. My first instinct was to hit decline. I was ashamed. I was a fraud. I was the client who was cheating, who was looking for the scammy shortcut after all my talk of strength and health. I did not want her to see me like this, sitting in the dark, my credit card out, staring at a miracle diet. But my hand moved, and I answered. Her face filled the screen. She was smiling, her hair pulled back from a run. "Hey, Hayden. Just checking in. You were quiet on the app today. Everything okay?" I tried to smile. My face felt stiff. "Hey, Lena. Yeah, just a long day at work. Tired." Lena's smile faded. She has a sixth sense for this stuff. She studied my face for a long second. "Hayden, what's going on? You have that look." "What look?" I asked, my voice small. "The look," she said, her voice gentle, not accusatory. "The look you had when you first called me. The, I need to fix this right now look. Someone got in your head again, didn't they? Someone made you feel like your body is an emergency that needs a patch." The words just fell out of me. The plateau. The 3 weeks of no change. The texts. Size 6. Don't disappoint me. And then, I turned my laptop so the camera could see the screen. I pointed at the bright pink letters. 20 pounds in 21 days, I whispered. Guaranteed. Lena was silent for a long moment. I expected a lecture. I expected her to be angry. She just nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice suddenly calm and professional. "You're a high-level financial analyst, right? At Northline?" "Yeah," I said, confused. So, if a brand new client walked into your office tomorrow," Lena said, "and he offered you an investment, he wanted $999, and he promised you, let's see, a guaranteed 100% return in 3 weeks, what would you do?" I did not even have to think. I'd laugh him out of my office. It's either a lie or it's impossibly high risk. It's a scam. Exactly, Lena said. So, do your job. Be Analyst Willis. You're thinking about making an investment. Read the contract. Before you buy this metamorphosis, read the fine print. I felt a little ridiculous, but I turned the laptop back. I scrolled past the glowing testimonials. I scrolled past the videos of women weeping with joy in their new, tiny jeans. I scrolled all the way down, to the very bottom of the page, to the text that was so small and gray it was almost invisible. Terms and conditions. I clicked it. I started to read. Hayden, Lena said. Read it out loud. I cleared my throat. Results not typical and may vary. I read. The 20-pound claim includes water weight, and results are not guaranteed. This program is not medically supervised. I kept going. The text got denser. Consult with a physician before beginning any rapid weight loss program, as side effects may include. And then I saw it. The line. By purchasing this program, user agrees to hold Metamorphosis LLC and its affiliates harmless from any and all damages, including, but not limited to, health complications, metabolic damage, hair loss, or the development of disordered eating patterns. I stopped reading. My mouth went dry. Metabolic damage. Disordered eating patterns. My hand, which had been sweating, was suddenly ice cold. I looked at my credit card on the table. This was not an investment. This was a predatory loan, and the interest rate was my future health. I looked back at Lena on the screen. My God, I said. If this was a financial product, I wouldn't just advise my client to run. I would be legally obligated to report the company offering it. So, Lena said, her voice soft, why would you sign that contract with your own body? A body that, as Dr. Aris told you, is perfectly healthy and not broken? The spell was broken. The panic, the shame, the desperate need for a guarantee. It all evaporated. I was not a failed daughter. I was Analyst Willis, and this was a bad deal. I closed the laptop lid with a decisive snap. Thank you, Lena, I said. Get some sleep. Hayden, she said. I'll see you Thursday. We're doing legs. After she hung up, I sat in the dark for another minute. I picked up my credit card and put it back in my wallet. I found a sticky note where I had scribbled the program's hotline. I tore it into a dozen tiny pieces and dropped them into the trash can. I felt restless, caged. I needed to move. I grabbed my keys and a jacket. It was raining outside, a cold, miserable Chicago drizzle. But I did not care. I walked out of my building and into the night. I did not put in my earbuds, no podcast, no angry music. I just walked. I let the rain hit my face. I listened to the sound of my sneakers on the wet pavement, the hiss of tires, the distant rumble of the L train. I just listened to my own heartbeat, steady and strong in my chest. I must have walked for an hour, just walking off the adrenaline of the crisis I had just averted. On my way back, I turned the corner onto my block. The smell of hot grease and salt hit me. A fast food place, its golden sign glowing like a warm, welcoming beacon in the rain. My stomach growled, sharp and demanding. The old Hayden, the one who lived on comfort food, would have been inside in a second. You deserve it. You had a hard night. A large fry and a cheeseburger will make it better. It's just a small comfort. I stopped on the sidewalk. I stood in the rain and looked at the bright, warm interior. I thought about the fine print, metabolic damage. I thought about the size 6 dress. And then I thought about the feeling of that deadlift bar leaving the floor. I turned away from the golden light. I walked past the fast food place and into the sterile, fluorescent glare of the convenience store next to it. I bought a large 1-liter bottle of Smart Water. I walked home, drinking it. The next day at the gym, I was quiet. Lena did not mention the website. She just pointed to the squat rack. All right, Willis, she said, her voice brisk. You survived a hostile takeover attempt. Let's celebrate. By doing more squats, I sighed. By doing heavier squats, she corrected me. She slid another 10-pound plate onto each side of the bar. It was more weight than I had ever tried. I don't know if I can do that, Lena. You're stronger than you were last week, she said, stepping back. You proved that last night. Now prove it to yourself. Get under the bar. I took a deep breath. I got under the bar. I braced my core, just as she had taught me. I lifted it off the rack. It was heavy. My legs shook. But I squatted. I went all the way down, past parallel, and I pushed the floor away. I came all the way back up. I did it again and again. When I racked the weight, I was breathing hard, but I was grinning. The number on the scale, 182, felt utterly, completely irrelevant. It was just data. But this strength, this was the asset. This was the real return on investment. That night, I opened my moleskin journal. I wrote, "Today, I was tempted by a predatory deal. I almost sold my long-term health for a short-term guarantee to please people who see me as a risk factor. But I did my due diligence. I read the fine print. I walked away from the bad contract. Today, I did not sign a bad deal with myself. That is a bigger victory than losing 2 pounds." My polite, vague, corporate speak replies had bought me about a month of peace. The panic over the size 6 dress had been beaten back by logic and heavy squats. I was in a groove. I was working. I was training. I was sleeping. I was, for the first time in my adult life, stable. Which is, of course, when they decided to detonate the next bomb. It was a Saturday evening. I was on my sofa, blissfully sore from a session with Lena, reading a prospectus for a new tech fund. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Elaine, a group video call link. The text read, "Hayden, we are all having a chat. We need to finalize some details about the wedding and get an update on your progress. Please join us now." My blood went cold. We are all progress. This was not a social call. This was a summons. This was a disciplinary hearing. I looked at the link. I could ignore it. I could fake a bad connection. I could say I was busy. The old Hayden would have done any of those. The old Hayden would have hidden. The new Hayden, the one who had read the fine print on her own life, sighed. She was Analyst Willis. She did not hide from bad meetings. She went into them. She controlled the narrative, and she set the terms. I took a deep breath. I put my prospectus down. I clicked the link. My laptop screen flickered, and then the faces resolved. It was a digital tribunal. Elaine was in the center square, in her perfectly lit kitchen in Appleton. Her face was set in a smile of bright, maternal concern. Maddie was in her new Milwaukee condo, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was not smiling. She looked impatient, like a CEO being forced to sit through a junior-level presentation. My father, Rob, was in his study, his square dark. He looked like he had been dragged there against his will. And then, in the fourth square, my stomach dropped. Evan Calloway. He was sitting next to Maddie, his arm draped casually over the back of her chair. He looked profoundly uncomfortable, his expensive magazine cover face tight with the awkwardness of a man who had wandered into the wrong department. They had brought the fiancé, they had brought an audience. This was not a hearing, it was a public execution. "Hayden, darling, there you are," Elaine chirped, her voice a full octave too high. "We were just talking about you." "Hi, Mom. Hi, Maddie, Dad, Evan." I kept my voice flat, neutral. "Honey," Elaine began, leaning into her camera, "we are just so excited about how well you're doing. We just, we need to get a real sense of things, for the dress." She smiled that bright, brittle smile. "So, could you do something for us? Just stand up, and back away from your camera, all the way back. Let us get a good look at the overall picture." My blood, which had been cold, turned hot. I was 16 again. I was in a dressing room, and my mother was telling me to turn around while she and Maddie exchanged disappointed looks. Maddie, never patient, cut in. Her voice was sharp. "Mom, this is a waste of time. I can't tell anything from this grainy video. She looked directly at me, at the camera. Hayden, just go get your scale. Bring it in front of the laptop and step on it. We need the number, now. The humiliation was so sudden, so absolute. It was breathtaking. It was a physical blow. They were asking me to perform my own shame for them, for Evan. I felt the old programming surge, the instinct to apologize. I'm so sorry. I'm trying. I know I'm a disappointment. Let me fix it. I could feel the hot, familiar sting of tears behind my eyes. I looked at my own reflection in the dark part of the screen. I saw a woman on the verge of collapse. And then I thought of the evidence folder. I thought of Lena. The goal is that your hands won't even shake. I glanced down at my own hands, resting on my keyboard. They were perfectly, completely, beautifully steady. I took a slow, deep breath. I focused on my core, just like Lena had taught me. Brace yourself. I looked back at the screen, and I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a cool, professional. Northline Capital Partners smile, the one I used right before I was about to kill a bad deal. No, I said. The word hung in the digital air. Maddie blinked, as if the audio had glitched. What did you say? I said, no, I repeated, my voice calm and clear. I will not be stepping on a scale for the camera. My weight is not a piece of family entertainment. That is not on the agenda for this evening. Elaine's face hardened. The bright maternal mask dissolved. Hayden, do not be difficult. We are not entertained. We are trying to help you. We just want to be sure that you are taking this seriously and that you won't spoil the photos for your sister. Spoil, like a piece of rotting fruit. Spoil the photos, I repeated, tasting the words. Mom, if my simple presence in a room is a risk factor that could spoil anything, then I promise you, the problem is not with my body. The problem is with the way this family looks at it. I had used their language. I had taken their private risk factor and thrown it back at them. Maddie's face, which had been bored and impatient, turned a dark, ugly red. The perfect bridal mask was gone. Oh my God, she snapped. You always do this. This is so typical. Hayden, you always have to make everything about you. You always have to be the victim. She leaned forward, her eyes flashing. This is my wedding. It is my day. That means I set the conditions, and the condition is that you look appropriate. If you want to be my maid of honor, you meet the condition. It is that simple. Okay, I said. I leaned forward too, matching her energy, but not her volume. Okay, Maddie, you're right. You get to set your conditions, and as a participant, I get to set mine. So let's talk terms. What are you talking about? She stammered. My conditions, I said, my voice as level as a balance sheet. If you want me to stand next to you at that altar, here they are. You, Mom, Dad, and everyone else in this family will stop commenting on my body. You will stop monitoring my progress. You will stop discussing my size, my weight, or my food choices. Not now, not at the rehearsal dinner, and not on your wedding day. This conversation, the one we are having right now, is over, permanently. If you can agree to that, I will be there. If you cannot, I will not. The silence that followed was absolute. Elaine was the first to find her voice. She let out a short, incredulous, barking laugh. Are you threatening us? Are you blackmailing your own sister? Are you saying you'll boycott her wedding if we don't do what you say? No, Mom, I said, and I almost felt sorry for her. She looked so confused. She had lost the script. I'm not blackmailing. I'm negotiating. This is a value proposition. You want something from me? My presence as a visually appropriate maid of honor. I want something from you. Basic, fundamental respect. I'm just, for the first time, setting the price. Suddenly, the fourth square, the silent one, spoke. Evan Calloway said. He cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. He was bright red. I mean, for what it's worth, Hayden, you look fantastic, really. You look incredibly healthy, way better than at Christmas." The digital room imploded. Maddie did not look at me. She turned her entire body and stared at her fiancé, her eyes wide with a look of pure, venomous betrayal. "You were supposed to be on my team." Elaine looked like Evan had just thrown a glass of water in her face. And I looked at my father. This was it. This was his moment. His daughter had just laid down the terms. An outside man, a stranger, had just backed her up. This was his chance to be the father in the room. "Dad," I said, my voice soft. Rob looked at me. His eyes were wide. I saw something in them I had not seen in 20 years. It looked like pride. It looked like awe. He opened his mouth. He took a breath. And then, his eyes flicked, just for a millisecond, to my mother's square on the screen. He saw the look on her face, the silent, icy command, and he deflated. The man who had been about to speak simply folded. He looked down at his desk. He shrank back into his chair, back into the shadows of his study. The fortress was sealed. The drawbridge was up. He was gone. I held his gaze for a second, but he wouldn't look up. I had my answer. "Well," I said, my voice brisk again, "I think that covers all the agenda items. You have my terms. Feel free to discuss them and get back to me." "Hayden, you wait right?" Elaine started, but I was already moving. "I have to go. I have a presentation to finish. Good night." I clicked end call. The screen went black. My apartment was silent. The only sound was the thumping of my own heart, loud in my ears. I was not shaking. I was not crying. I stood up, my shoulders, my back, my legs. Every muscle I had spent the last 3 months building ached. It was a profound, deep soreness, as if I had just completed the heaviest lift of my life. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hand perfectly steady. I realized I had just lifted a weight that had been crushing me for 30 years, the weight of please everyone, and for the first time, I had set it down. The 2 weeks following the video call were a strange, hollow truce. They had not replied to my terms. They had not agreed, but they had not refused. They had simply stopped. No texts, no calls, no links. The silence from Appleton was absolute. I knew this was not acceptance. It was a tactical retreat. They were waiting. Then, the summons, an email from Elaine, not a plea, not an apology, a command. "We are having a family dinner for all the local relatives to see you 2 weeks before the wedding. Evan's parents will be there. Your presence is required." It was the final inspection, the test case. They wanted to see the new product in person before the launch date. They wanted to see if their risk factor had been successfully managed. The old Hayden would have driven up in a panic, 15 minutes early, wearing something black and baggy, hoping to pass inspection. I left Chicago on that Saturday afternoon. I hit traffic. I did not speed. I did not panic. I pulled onto my parents' street at 6:10 p.m. The dinner was at 6. For the first time in my 30 years, I was late. I walked up the perfect flagstone path. I looked at the front door, which I knew would be unlocked. I looked at the antique doorbell, the one no one was ever supposed to touch. I pressed my thumb to it. The sound, a loud, cheerful ding-dong, felt like a gunshot in the sacred silence of the Willis home. It was a violation of the primary rule, "Thou shalt not shatter the atmosphere." I heard a panicked shuffling inside. The door was yanked open. It was my Aunt Linda, the one who had accidentally sent the screenshot. She was holding a tray of appetizers, her face flushed. "Elaine, She stopped. She just stopped. Her mouth was open. She stared at me. "Hayden?" she whispered. "Hi, Aunt Linda," I said. "Am I late?" She did not answer. She was taking in the data. The woman she had last seen at Christmas, the one in the baggy sweater, was gone. In her place was a woman wearing a razor-sharp black pencil skirt that fit her perfectly, a sleeveless, high-neck silk shell in a deep forest green, and boots with a 3-inch heel. My hair, which had once been a non-committal, mousy brown, was now a short, angular, confident cut, dyed a cool, reflective ash brown. My shoulders, no longer rounded in a permanent defensive cringe, were straight. I had lost nearly 45 pounds, but that was not the change she was seeing. The weight was gone, but the presence was not. I was not the smaller version of myself they had ordered. I was a completely different model. "My God," Linda breathed, finally. "Hayden, you look. "I'm here for dinner," I said, smiling, and stepped past her, into the house. I walked toward the dining room. I could hear the chatter, the clinking of glasses, the loud false laugh of my mother. I entered the dining room. The world stopped. It was not an exaggeration. It was a complete cessation of sound. My father, pouring a glass of wine, stopped. Aunt Carol, mid-anecdote, froze. Evan's mother, a formidable woman in pearls, let her smile go rigid. And my mother, at the head of the table, just stared. A chorus of soft, shocked "oh my's" and "is that?" rippled through the aunts. I saw Maddie. She was across the room, near the fireplace, talking to Evan. She turned, annoyance on her face. "Mom, what is—" She saw me. Her face went blank. Then, her eyes, like a heat-seeking missile, flicked straight to Evan. She caught it. I caught it, too. The one thing she could not control, Evan's reaction. It was not a leer. It was not improper. It was just a moment of pure, unguarded, stunned admiration. He just stared, his mask, the board, leveraging assets financier, was gone. Maddie saw it, and her blank expression curdled. In 1 second, it turned into a dark, potent, unfiltered jealousy. I had not just defied her. I had, in that one instant, stolen her light. Elaine recovered first. Her face, which had been slack with shock, tightened into a mask of pure glacial control. The matriarch was threatened, and she came out swinging. "Hayden," she said, her voice sharp. "You're late. And what on earth have you done to yourself?" The room, which had been frozen, now turned to watch the execution. "I got a haircut, Mom," I said, walking to the bar to pour myself a glass of water. "You've lost far too much weight," she snapped, her voice ringing with disapproval. "You look angular, sharp. That skirt is completely inappropriate for a family dinner." "I think it's professional," I said. "And your hair," she continued, her voice rising. "Why would you cut it all off? And that color, it's so harsh. Maddie has always been the blonde in this family. You look washed out." Translation: You look good, you look powerful, and you are a threat to the designated star of the show. Get back in your box. It was then that I noticed the large flat-screen television mounted on the dining room wall. A slideshow was running. Pictures of Maddie and Evan. Maddie as a child, Maddie at her prom, Maddie and Evan in Tuscany. And then, a new slide. It was a photo of me, from last Christmas, the one where I was half hidden by the poinsettia. My face puffy, my body shapeless in that baggy red sweater. It was blown up, filling the 55-inch screen. It was humiliating. The next slide, Maddie, looking perfect. The next slide, me, from Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. I was caught mid-bite, my mouth full, my eyes half closed. I just stared at it. "Isn't it wonderful?" Elaine said, oblivious, or perhaps perfectly aware. "I was just showing Evan's parents how far you've come. I put together this little progression. It's like one of those before and after motivation stories. Everyone is so proud of your effort." I was not a daughter. I was a case study. I was the before picture for her to display at a dinner party, a testament to her management. I calmly raised my phone. I took a picture of the screen, another file for the evidence folder. "That's quite a display, Mom," I said, my voice dead level. Maddie, who had crossed the room to stand beside her mother, her face still stormy from Evan's reaction. chimed in, "I seriously hope you're not planning on wearing your hair like that to the wedding." Hayden, "Why not, Maddie?" "Because," she sneered, "the bridesmaid dresses are coral. It's a soft, romantic color. That ashy color will clash horribly. You'll ruin the whole color palette." "You look very healthy, kiddo," my father murmured, so low I could barely hear him. He was trying, in his small, frightened way. Elaine cut him off before the words even finished. "She looks thin. Rob, there's a difference. Healthy is not the word. Her arms are still undefined." The dinner was a nightmare. The food was perfect. The wine was expensive, and the tension was so thick I could have cut it with a steak knife. I was polite. I answered Evan's mother's questions about derivatives. I ate my chicken. I did not engage. I simply existed. Finally, as dessert was being served, the conversation turned to the wedding day logistics, the photographer, the shot list, and then Aunt Carol, the one from the wedding strategy chat, made her fatal mistake. She laughed, a high, tinkling sound. "Well, Elaine," she said, raising her wine glass, "at least with this new Hayden, we won't have to worry about the photo composition. No need to put her in the back row this time." The table went silent. A spoon clattered. Aunt Carol's smile froze. She realized, too late, that she had just said the quiet part out loud. She had just confirmed the risk factor conspiracy in front of the entire dinner party. I looked at my mother. I looked at Maddie. They were both pale. I slowly placed my water glass on the table. The small clink echoed in the sudden, dead silence. "That's good to know, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice clear and carrying, "because I won't be standing in the back row." I looked at my mother. I looked at my sister. "Let's clear this up. So the strategy is simple for everyone. If I am in this wedding, I will stand where a maid of honor is supposed to stand, right at the front, right next to the bride. I will not be moved, angled, or hidden. I will not be a composition problem you solve." I let the words hang. "And if that," I continued, "makes anyone uncomfortable, or clashes with the palette, or spoils the image, then you are all more than welcome to remove me from the plan. Right now, I'm fine either way." The silence was broken by Maddie. She did not yell. She hissed. The polite, bridal veneer was completely gone, ripped away, revealing the raw, spoiled, rotten core I had known my whole life. "You just had to do it, didn't you?" she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "You couldn't let me have this. This is my wedding, my party, and you just had to steal the spotlight." She stood up, her chair scraping loudly on the hardwood floor. "Even when you're losing weight, you have to do it in the most dramatic, selfish, look-at-me way possible. You had to show up 2 weeks before my wedding, looking like that, just to make sure every single person in the room would be looking at you and not me." The accusation was so nakedly, pathetically honest that I almost laughed. I stood up, too. I looked at my sister, not with the anger she so clearly wanted, but with a kind of cold, objective pity. She had revealed her entire hand. I gave her a small, tight smile. "You're wrong, Maddie," I said, my voice quiet. "The spotlight isn't something anyone gives you or steals from you." I looked around the silent, horrified room. It just finds the person in the room who is brave enough to stand in her own light. I picked up my purse. "Thank you for dinner. Mom, Evan's parents, it was a pleasure to meet you." I turned and walked out of the dining room. I walked down the hall, opened the front door I had been forbidden to ring, and stepped out into the cool Wisconsin night. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. The dinner was over. The inspection was over. But I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that this was not a victory. If I showed up to that wedding, it would not be a celebration. It would be a war. It would be a constant battle of positioning, of microaggressions, of whispers. The feeling in my gut was clear. This was not the end. I had not won. I had just survived. And the thought of surviving a 2-day wedding event felt, in that moment, more exhausting than all the squats and deadlifts combined. If I went, I would be walking right back into their frame. And I was just starting to realize I did not have to. The drive back to Chicago was a 2.5-hour void. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't listen to a podcast. I just drove, replaying the entire dinner scene on a loop in my head. Aunt Carol's idiotic, revealing comment, my mother's instant, acidic disapproval, Maddie's face, contorted with a jealousy that was so raw and honest it was almost pitiful. My father's retreat. I had walked out. I had set my terms. I had taken the power. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I had just aced the most brutal final exam of my life, only to be told by the professor that I had been graded on the wrong curve. I had done everything they asked. I had managed myself, and they had still failed me. I had shown up smaller, and they had called it inappropriate. I had shown up strong, and they had called it clashing. I had won the battle, only to realize I was still losing the war. I got back to my apartment after midnight, poured a glass of water, and fell into bed. The barrage started at 9 a.m. They had clearly regrouped, strategized, and were now launching a coordinated, multi-platform attack. First, my mother. She didn't text. She sent a voice note. Her voice was trembling, wet with a martyr's tears. Hayden, I just don't know what to do with you anymore. I don't understand. You walk into my home. You make a scene in front of Evan's parents. You upset your sister. We were all so proud of your effort, and you just threw it back in our faces. Most girls would be thrilled to get that much praise for improving themselves. But you just want to be difficult. You just want to make this about you. Please, honey, don't ruin this. Don't make this hard for your sister. Translation: your boundaries are an inconvenience. Your strength is an act of aggression. Please go back to being the sad, fat daughter we understood. Next, Maddie, she, of course, sent an email, a formal declaration of war. The subject line was, simply, "This is not about you." Her email read, "I don't know what game you are playing, Hayden, but you need to stop it. Now, this is my year. This is my wedding. I am the bride. You are the maid of honor. Your only job is to show up, wear the dress I picked, and smile for the camera. You do not get to make demands. You do not get to set terms on my wedding day. You are being unbelievably selfish. You're just trying to ruin this for me because you're finally getting some attention for losing weight and you can't stand for it to not be about you. You're trying to steal my spotlight. Stop it. Just stop." Translation: get back in your box. The light is mine. It has always been mine. Finally, the chorus of concerned aunts, the flying monkeys, dispatched to enforce the family line. A text from Aunt Carol. Hayden, dear, you completely misunderstood me. We are all so proud of you. You just looked wonderful. Don't make your mother sad on such an important day. You know how much this means to her. A text from another aunt. You only have one sister. Hayden, you two need to stick together. Don't let a little argument about a dress and some hair color come between you for the rest of your lives. It's just not worth it. Keep the peace. A little argument. They were doing it. They were systematically minimizing 2 decades of targeted, psychological warfare into a little argument about a dress. They were rewriting the narrative, painting me as the volatile, overly sensitive, selfish one who was making a scene and ruining everything. The old Hayden would have replied. She would have called, weeping. She would have defended herself. She would have written a long, desperate email, begging them to understand. She would have fought back, which is exactly what they wanted. Analyst Willis? She opened her laptop. I minimized the texts. I sent the emails to a new folder. I opened a clean new Excel file. I created a new worksheet. I titled it, Maddie's Wedding Cost-Benefit Analysis. In column A, I typed the header, Costs, Emotional, Physical, and Financial. In column B, I typed the header, Benefits, perceived and actual. I started with column A, the costs. 1. Round-trip flight to Appleton during peak season. Approximate cost, $600. 2. Two-night hotel stay. I was not, under any circumstances, staying in that house. Approximate cost, $400. 3. Rental car. Approximate cost, $150. 4. The actual bridesmaid dress, which I had not yet paid for, $280. 5. Wedding gift, minimum contribution, $500. 6. Inevitable, non-stop, public-facing, body-shaming, and commentary disguised as compliments. Probability, 100%. 7. Being used as a before and after prop for my mother's management skills. Probability, 100%. 8. Public scrutiny of my hair, my makeup, and my clashing color palette. Probability, 100%. 9. Watching my father remain silent while I am attacked. Probability, 100%. 10. Reinforcing their core belief that their tactics, bullying, manipulation, and guilt ultimately work. Cost, incalculable. 11. The required emotional hangover of surviving the 3-day ordeal. Cost, at least 1 week of productivity. I stopped and looked at the list. It was long. It was brutal. Now, column B, the benefits. 1. Keeping the peace, a temporary fragile state that only benefits them. 2. Avoiding the ungrateful or selfish daughter-sister label, a label they were already applying. 3. Being in the family photographs that will hang on my parents' wall for the next 40 years. I stared at the screen. I could not think of a single other benefit. The data was clear. The benefits were all perceived. They were intangible, temporary, and based entirely on their approval. The costs were tangible, certain, and reinforced the very cycle I had just spent 6 months trying to break. I was still staring at the spreadsheet when I went to the gym that afternoon. I was distracted. My form was sloppy. I almost dropped a kettlebell on my foot. Lena blew her whistle. "Willis, my office, now." She pulled me aside, away from the other clients. "You're not here. You're in your head, and you're going to hurt yourself. What happened? I thought the dinner was done." I told her. The slideshow, the clashing hair, the barrage of texts, the voice note, the email, the spreadsheet. She listened, her arms crossed, nodding slowly. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Okay, analyst," she said. "Let's run the numbers. You have a deal on your desk, a potential merger. The buy-in is, let's call it $1,900, plus a significant portion of your sanity. The guaranteed return is temporary family peace and a picture on a wall. The long-term risk profile is extremely high, with a guaranteed emotional loss and a near certainty of reinforcing a toxic asset's hold on your entire life portfolio." She raised an eyebrow. "As a financial analyst, Hayden, do you sign this deal? Do you advise your client to take this position?" I looked at her, and I laughed. It was a bitter, choked sound. "No, I wouldn't just advise them not to sign. I'd tell them to run. I'd tell them this isn't an investment. It's a liability. It's a guaranteed loss." "So," Lena said, her voice soft but not weak, "why are you trying so hard to force yourself to sign it? Just because the other party is labeled family?" I had no answer. I went home from the gym. Lena's words were ringing in my ears. "Why are you trying to sign it?" I opened my laptop, intending to work. My inbox was flooded again. More texts from aunts. I was about to shut it all down when one email, buried at the bottom, caught my eye. The sender was Karen Willis. Aunt Karen, my father's sister, the family black sheep. She had divorced her first husband, moved to Portland, married a woman, and was now a landscape architect. Elaine despised her, referring to her only as your father's flighty sister. We saw her once every 5 years, maybe. The subject line was just, "The dinner." I clicked it. "My dearest Hayden," it began. Your Aunt Linda is a terrible and loud gossip, and your Aunt Carol isn't far behind. I've heard what happened at your mother's inspection dinner. I've heard what you wore. I've heard what you said. And I've heard how you walked out. I am just writing you one single, private email to tell you one single thing. You are not crazy. What you are seeing in your mother is what I saw 30 years ago. Elaine Willis is a director, not a mother. She directs scenes. She manages images, and she cannot stand a character who goes off script. She did it to me when I decided to leave my husband. She told the entire family I was spoiling the image and being selfish. She tried to manage me too. I'm writing to tell you that you are not selfish. You are not ruining anything. You are just finally going off script. I know the pressure you're under to go to this wedding. I know they're all telling you that you only have one sister and to keep the peace, but sometimes, Hayden, the bravest, kindest, and most loving thing you can do for yourself is to not show up. If you go, they learn that their tactics, while needing a little adjustment, still work. They learn that they still own you. If you don't go, they learn, for the first time, that you are no longer a part of their play. Whatever you do, I think you are braver than all of us put together. I read the email, then I read it again, and a third time. You are not crazy. She is a director, not a mother. Sometimes the bravest thing is to not show up. Aunt Karen's words opened a door in my mind that I had not even realized was there. I had been agonizing over how to attend. I had been negotiating the terms of my attendance. I had never, not once, truly considered the alternative. Not going was not an act of childish spite. It was not a boycott. It was not ruining anything. It was a strategic divestment. I stared at my screen. A new, terrifying, thrilling thought took root. If I am not in Appleton, Wisconsin, in 2 weeks, where am I? I opened a new browser tab. I have a week of vacation time that my boss at Northline has been forcing me to schedule or lose. It just so happens to fall exactly over the week of the wedding. I typed in wellness retreat. I scrolled past juice cleanses in California and yoga studios in Arizona. And then I saw it, a place in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Desert Star Retreat. The pictures were stunning, not of people, of space. Adobe casitas built into red rock cliffs, vast, empty landscapes, infinity pools that seemed to blur into the desert sky. It promised profound rest, guided high desert hiking, private meditation, and total disconnection. I clicked on reservations. My fingers moved on their own. I punched in the dates. Friday, the day of the rehearsal dinner. Saturday, the day of the wedding. Sunday, the day of the farewell brunch. A package was available. The Solo Rejuvenation Package. 3 nights, all-inclusive, private casita, all meals, 2 spa treatments, guided hiking, and meditation sessions. And then I saw the price. $3,900. I physically recoiled from the screen. $3,900. It was obscene. It was more than 2 months' rent. It was nearly the entire amount I had painstakingly saved for the down payment on a small condo in Lincoln Park I had been dreaming of. To spend that much on myself for a weekend? The guilt was immediate, and it was crushing. It was Elaine's voice in my head. How wasteful, how selfish, how obscenely indulgent. All that money just for you? I was about to close the tab. I really was. And then I looked at my spreadsheet. Column A, column B. I did the math. I looked at the costs column for the wedding, the flight, the hotel, the rental car, the gift. I'd be spending at least $1,800, maybe $2,000 to go and be emotionally brutalized. So what was the real cost? Option A, spend $2,000 to be a risk factor. Option B, spend $3,900 to be free. I looked at the price tag again. $3,900. I compared it to the cost of the next 30 years, the cost of every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every baptism, every next family event where I would have to fight this same battle, all because I had caved on this one. I thought about Maddie's 35-pound requirement. I thought about my mother's before and after slideshow. I thought about my father's suffocating, cowardly silence. I picked up my moleskin journal. I opened to a new page. I wrote, I am facing two numbers, $2,000 to repeat the last 30 years, or $3,900 to buy the next 30. If I spend this money on a weekend retreat, am I being a foolish, indulgent child? Or is this the single greatest high-yield investment I will ever make in my entire life? I looked at the screen, the Adobe casita, the endless, open desert. I knew what Analyst Willis would do. She would invest. She would secure the asset. It was Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. The sun was streaming into my Chicago apartment, hitting the glass and steel and making everything look sharp and clean. I was sitting at my desk, my laptop open. On the screen was the Desert Star Retreat reservation page. My name was in the box. My email was in the box. The dates, the exact dates of my sister's wedding weekend, were correct. All that was left was a bright, welcoming, terrifying button that said, Confirm payment. My phone was on the desk next to me, face down. It was not silent. It was vibrating. It had been vibrating, almost non-stop, for 2 days. It was a physical manifestation of my family's panic, a frantic, buzzing tantrum. I did not have to look to know what it was. 7 missed calls from Elaine, 3 from Maddie, a fresh wave of texts from the aunts, and a new, long, hysterical email from my mother that I had not opened. The tone had shifted from guilt, "You're making me sad," to outright accusation. "You are a cruel and selfish person." I was at the end of the line. They were demanding an answer. They were demanding my capitulation. I was about to give them one, just not the one they wanted. Before my finger could move to the confirm payment button, I did the one last thing I had to do. I minimized the browser. I opened my email client. I clicked New Message. In the To field, I typed, slowly and deliberately, Elaine Willis, Robert Willis, Madison Willis. In the subject field, I typed, Regarding Maddie's wedding. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was it, the last bridge. I could still turn back. I could still call, apologize, beg for forgiveness, and spend $2,000 to be miserable. I could still be their risk factor. Or I could press Send. I began to type. I did not type what the old Hayden would have. I did not write a long, tear-stained, multi-page defense of my feelings. I did not beg them to understand. I did not itemize their abuses. I was Analyst Willis. I was sending a final memo. My email was 5 sentences long. To all of you, I have made my decision regarding the wedding. I will not be attending. This decision has nothing to do with my hair, my clothing, or the weight I have lost. It is a response to the profound and ongoing lack of respect I have received from this family, a dynamic I am no longer willing to participate in. I wish Maddie a very happy wedding day. I will be using that weekend for my own rest and self-care. This decision is final. Please respect it. I signed it, simply, Hayden. I read it back. Once, it was cold. It was clean. It was an antiseptic blade, cutting the cord. My hand was shaking, just slightly, not from fear, not anymore. It was shaking with the sheer, unadulterated adrenaline of what I was about to do. But my chest, which had been tight for 30 years, felt light. It felt open. I took a breath. I moved the mouse. The small white arrow hovered over the send button. I clicked. The whoosh sound from my laptop speakers, the tiny, insignificant file transfer sound, was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of a 20-year-old rope, stretched to its breaking point, finally, blessedly, snapping in two. It was done. I sat there for a second, letting the finality of it wash over me. I had just resigned. I closed the email client. I maximized the browser tab. The Adobe casita was still there, the pristine desert landscape, and the price. $3,900. It was a terrifying number, an absurd number. I heard two voices in my head, clear as day. The first was my mother's. You are an ungrateful, selfish child. To spend that much money on yourself, just for a weekend? You are wasteful. You are spoiled. The second was Lena's. This isn't a vacation. Hayden, you're not buying a hotel room. You're buying back the ownership of your own life. What's that worth? I looked at the number, $3,900. I picked up my American Express. I typed in the 16 digits. I typed in the expiration date. My finger hovered over the confirm payment button. I thought of the before and after slideshow. I thought of the size 6 ultimatum. I thought of my father, looking at his shoes. I thought of the risk factor screenshot. I clicked the button. The page loaded, a small, spinning wheel. For a second, I thought my card would be declined. And then, new text appeared, green, bright. Your reservation is confirmed. We look forward to welcoming you to Desert Star Retreat. I let out a breath I'd been holding since that Sunday lunch in Appleton. It felt like closing the biggest deal of my career, the one I had been working on my entire life. It was a contract, signed and executed, with the only person who mattered, me. My phone, on the desk, buzzed again, angrily, violently. It was like a dying wasp. They must have received the email. The digital bomb had landed. I looked at the phone as it rattled on the wood. I watched it try to command my attention, to force a response, to pull me back into the chaos. I calmly reached over. I pressed the power button on the side. I held it. The screen lit up, asking me to confirm. I slid my finger across power off. The screen went black. The buzzing stopped. I picked up the inert, silent, powerless rectangle of glass and metal. I opened the top drawer of my desk, the one filled with old pens and paper clips. I dropped the phone inside. I closed the drawer. I looked at the closed drawer, and a thought, clear and calm, came to me. If the world is burning down, it can burn for a weekend. It can burn without me. I spent the rest of the day in a state of quiet, productive bliss. I worked on my tech fund prospectus. I answered emails. I went to the gym and had a brutal, fantastic session with Lena. I told her, I closed the deal. She knew exactly what I meant. She just smiled and handed me a heavier kettlebell. That evening, I was making my sensible chicken and broccoli. My laptop was open on the counter. I was checking my bank account, just to see the damage. I saw the debit, $3,900. It made my stomach lurch, just a little. But then, I saw something else. A new transaction, a deposit. It was a small Zelle transfer, $100. The sender, Robert Willis. I stared at it, confused. What was this? Guilt money? A bribe? The memo line was only 7 words. Enjoy a fancy coffee on me, Dad. My heart started to pound. I opened my email. Not the family war zone email, but my private one. There was a new message, from my father's personal account. The subject was just, Hayden. I opened it. The email was almost as short as my own. Hayden. I know I couldn't say anything in front of everyone. I'm not strong like you are. I've never been. But I want you to know, I understand. I am proud of the woman you've become. I hope you find peace this weekend. You don't have to reply to this. Dad. I sat down on my kitchen stool. The chicken was getting cold. I started to cry. But these were not the tears from the car ride home from Appleton. Those were the hot, angry, helpless tears of a victim, of a child begging to be seen. These were different. These were the quiet, heavy, cleansing tears of validation, the tears of a woman who had just been told, by the one person she had given up on, that she was not crazy. I put my head down on the cool granite countertop, and I cried for my father's cowardice, for my mother's cruelty, and for the 30 years it had taken me to get to this one single solitary Tuesday. After a few minutes, I wiped my face. I opened my moleskin journal. I wrote, date, October 28th. Transaction: finalized divestment from Willis Family Holdings, Appleton. Transaction: acquired 100% equity in Hayden Willis, Inc. I paused, then added one last line. Today, I lost an old family, temporarily, but I signed a lifelong contract with myself. Price: $3,900. Feeling: priceless. I stepped out of the plane in Santa Fe into a different atmosphere. The air wasn't just air. It was a substance. It was dry, clean, and carried the sharp, aromatic scent of high desert pine and warm sand. It was the complete opposite of the humid, heavy, impending storm air of a Wisconsin fall. A car was waiting. When I arrived at Desert Star Retreat, a woman with a calm, kind face greeted me by name. She handed me a cool glass of cucumber water. "Welcome, Hayden," she said, her voice a low, soothing hum. "We're so glad you're here. This weekend is for you to mute the world. Your phone, if you'd like, can go right in the casita safe. We encourage it." Mute the world. It was the permission I had just paid $3,900 to receive. My casita was not a room. It was a small, private adobe house carved into the red earth. Inside, it was all cool stone, heavy, dark wood, and pale linens. The back wall was a sheet of glass that opened onto a private balcony, and the view. It was not a view. It was a void. It was an endless, staggering expanse of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, glowing red and purple in the late afternoon sun. In the bathroom, there was no flimsy fiberglass shower. There was a stone bathtub, big enough for two, carved out of a single piece of granite, sitting in front of another massive window. I stood there, looking at the tub, and I started to laugh. It was a real, bubbling, genuine laugh. I was thinking of my family. I was thinking of Elaine, Maddie, and the aunts. Right at this very moment, they were all descending on some stuffy, over-decorated church hall for the rehearsal. They were probably arguing, in panicked whispers, about the flower arrangements, about who was standing where for the all-important photos, about the seating chart. And I was standing here, in profound, magnificent silence, deciding which high-end bath oil to use. I slept for 10 straight hours, not the restless, anxious sleep of my Chicago apartment, but a deep, dreamless, lead-heavy sleep. The next morning, Saturday, the wedding day, I woke up with the sun. I had signed up for a guided trail hike. There were only 3 of us. Me, a quiet woman from Seattle, and our guide, a man named Marcus. We hiked. We climbed up a narrow, rocky trail, and I was fine. My legs, the ones that had been called too heavy and undefined, carried me. They were strong. They pumped. They burned. They pushed me up the red rock, higher and higher. I wasn't even the last in line. I breathed in the cool morning air. It tasted like piñon and dust. I was astounded at what my body could do. Now that I was finally using it for its intended purpose, to move, to climb, to be strong, instead of just as a showpiece to be criticized. As we reached a plateau overlooking the entire valley, Marcus handed us water bottles. "This is a special place," he said. "People usually come up here for a reason, an anniversary, a birthday." He smiled at me. "What's the occasion for you, Hayden?" I looked out over the vast, empty, beautiful world. I took another deep swig of water. I smiled back, and I had never felt less sarcastic in my life. "I'm here," I said, "to celebrate something I'm not attending." Marcus just nodded, as if this was the most normal, wisest answer he had ever heard. "Well," he said, "that's the best reason of all, to celebrate a choice." That afternoon, while the guests in Appleton were getting their hair sprayed into stiff, identical updos, I was face down on a massage table. A woman was working on my shoulders, my back, the muscles that had been coiled tight for 30 years. Somewhere, in the distant, sun-drenched courtyard, I heard a phone ring, a faint, digital chime. And I felt a wave of pure, unadulterated bliss, because it was not mine. Mine was in the safe, off, black, dead to the world. I was, for one entire wedding day, blessedly, completely, and totally unreachable. Later, around 4 p.m., I knew the ceremony in Wisconsin would be starting. The organ would be playing. The risk factor would have been officially noted as absent. I was on my private balcony. The staff had brought me a late lunch. It was a simple, perfect salad with grilled salmon and a piece of warm, crusty bread with local honey. I sat there, in a thick white robe, my feet up on the railing. I looked out at the mountains. I thought, right now, people are whispering. Where is she? Where's Hayden? Why isn't the maid of honor here? And then, the second, more powerful thought. I am, for the first time in my life, not responsible for their questions. I do not have to have an answer. I took a bite of the bread. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. I stayed off my phone all day, all night. It was not until Sunday, after a final to quiet breakfast, as I was packing my bag to check out, that I finally walked to the safe. I took out the phone. I powered it on. It was like setting off a bomb. The screen lit up, and the phone began to shake violently in my hand, a solid, vibrating buzz of pure, distilled rage. It went on for almost a full minute. Dozens of notifications, dozens. 52 text messages, 19 missed calls, 8 new voicemails, 7 new emails. They were from everyone: Elaine, Maddie, Aunt Carol, Aunt Linda, Evan, people I barely knew, cousins, old family friends. The preview snippets were a chaotic jumble of fury. Elaine, how dare you? You have ruined. Maddie, you are dead to me, a jealous, evil. Aunt Carol, I have never seen your mother so. Evan, Hayden, please call me. This is. I stared at the wall of rage. The old Hayden would have collapsed. She would have sat on the floor and wept. Analyst Willis? She just scrolled. She was an auditor looking for the signal in the noise. I did not read the texts. I did not listen to the voicemails. I just scrolled. Deleting. It was digital housekeeping. And then I saw it. An email from the one person I wanted to hear from. From Karen Willis. Subject: You missed one hell of a show. Kid. I took my bag, went to the lobby, and checked out. I sat in the car on the way to the airport, the desert sliding past my window, and I opened Aunt Karen's email. My dearest Hayden, she began. Well, you did it, and I have to say, it was a masterpiece. I was not there, of course. My invitation must have gotten lost in the mail for the last 20 years, but my old friend, your Aunt Linda, has a mouth that could transmit news faster than any wire service. She called me last night, absolutely drunk with gossip. Here is the play-by-play, as I received it. 1. The atmosphere. The wedding was apparently, and I quote, as stiff as a board. Everyone was there, but it felt like a funeral. Everyone was just waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for you. 2. The whispers. Apparently, the "Where is Hayden?" question was the official sport of the cocktail hour. Elaine and Maddie had clearly coordinated their story. Hayden had a last-minute work emergency. She is just devastated to miss it. The story was so flimsy, no one bought it. 3. The compliments. This is my favorite part. Apparently, several people, drunk ones, brave ones, went up to Maddie to congratulate her, and then said, "It's such a shame about Hayden. I saw her at that dinner 2 weeks ago, and she looks absolutely stunning. What a shame she's not in the photos." Linda said every time this happened. Maddie's smile looked like it was carved from granite. 4. The bridesmaid incident. This is the big one. After the ceremony, Maddie apparently went nuclear on her other bridesmaid, a sorority sister named Jessica. Why? Because Jessica got caught looking at her phone and whispered to another girl, "Oh my God, look at Hayden's picture. She looks way happier in the desert than anyone does here." 5. The toast. It gets better. Your Uncle Stephen, who has been in his cup since 1994, got the microphone. He gave a rambling, incoherent speech, and he ended it with this gem. And a toast to the other Willis sister. Hayden, I don't know where she is, but if she's as smart as she's always been, she's probably somewhere a hell of a lot more fun than this. Linda said the entire ballroom of 200 people just laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real, awkward, he said the truth laugh. 6. The aftermath. Elaine is telling everyone you have publicly disgraced the family, that your selfishness has ruined the most important day of your sister's life, by not being there, by simply not showing up. So, there you have it. My dear, the wedding is over. The photos are taken, with a conspicuous gap where you should have been. But the lesson? The lesson everyone is whispering about over their brunch this morning? It's this. If you treat your daughter like a risk factor for her entire life, you shouldn't be surprised when she finally, wisely, chooses a desert over your dining room. You have all my love and all my admiration, Kay. I finished the email just as the car pulled up to the airport. I sat there, in the back seat, and I did the one thing I had not done all weekend. I laughed. I laughed out loud. I laughed until tears were rolling down my cheeks. It was perfect. I realized, in that moment, what true revenge was. It was not showing up in a revenge body to steal Maddie's spotlight. That would have been their game. It would have been me, still desperate for their approval, trying to win on their terms. The real victory? The real, profound, $3,900 victory? It was not being there. It was being so healthy, so happy, and so far away that my absence was more powerful than my presence. It was making them explain to 200 people why I wasn't there. It was forcing them to live with the empty space I had left behind, a space that was shaped exactly like their own cruelty. I walked into the airport, my phone in my hand. I opened my social media. I had not posted anything. The bridesmaid must have seen a post from the retreat itself, or perhaps a post from one of the other hikers. But now, I would post something. I scrolled through the photos I had taken. I found the one from the hike. Me, standing on the plateau, my arms wide, the endless, magnificent desert at my back. I was not looking at the camera. I was looking out at the view. I was breathing it in. I was strong. I was free. I posted it. My caption was simple. 10 words. Finally learned that not every invitation is worth a yes. I did not tag anyone. I did not mention a wedding. I did not mention a family. I did not have to. I put my phone on airplane mode, and I boarded my flight home. I walked back into my apartment in Chicago. The key turned in the lock. The door swung open. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The steel and glass, the minimalist sofa, the neutral tones. But it was all different, because I was different. I stood in the entryway, my travel bag still on my shoulder, and I realized that the person who had left this apartment 4 days ago was not the person who had just returned. The apartment was the same. The occupant was new. I did not unpack. I walked down the short hallway. On the wall, there had always been one, single, framed photograph. It was from a family trip to Lake Michigan, maybe 10 years ago. We were all there, Elaine, Rob, Maddie, and me. We were all smiling. A perfect, curated image of family happiness. A total lie. I stopped. I looked at it. I looked at the old Hayden in the photo, the one in the back row, the one with the forced smile. I took the frame off the wall. I did not smash it. I did not do anything dramatic. I just unlocked the small tabs on the back, slid the photo out, and dropped the picture of my family into the paper shredder. I watched the machine turn it into meaningless, cross-cut strips of confetti. I put the empty frame on my desk. I decided, fill it with something else. I went back to my laptop, opened my photos from the trip, and found the one from the hike, me, on the plateau, arms wide, my back to the camera, facing the endless, magnificent desert. I sent it to be printed. I went to my phone. I unmuted my text messages. The rage was still there, but it was now mixed with a new, pathetic kind of pleading. I did not engage. I did not block. Blocking was an emotional response. It was an admission that they still had the power to hurt me. I simply curated. I went to the main Willis family group chat. I muted it, not for a day, not for a year. I muted it indefinitely. I went to my email. I created a new filter. Any message from Elaine Willis or Maddie Willis was to bypass my inbox entirely and be automatically archived into a new folder. A folder I labeled Appleton File. I decided, as an analyst, that I would check that folder once a month. I would read their words not as a daughter, but as a professional assessing a volatile, non-essential asset. I would read them when I was calm, when I was strong, and most importantly, when I was no longer expecting the one thing I knew I would never get, an apology. The next day, just out of curiosity, I opened the Appleton File. There it was, a new email from Elaine. It was a novel, a long, rambling, multi-thousand-word epic of her own victimhood. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. It cycled through all the greatest hits. First, the blame. You embarrassed us all. You shamed your sister. Evan's parents think our family is broken because of your selfishness. Second, the victimhood. I don't know what I did to deserve such a cruel child. All I ever did was love you. All I ever wanted was for you to be your best self. Third, the gaslighting. Maddie is devastated. She cried for her entire honeymoon. You ruined it. You ruined the most special memory of her life because you needed attention. And then, buried in the middle of a paragraph about how hard her life had been, was the confession, the one she did not even realize she was making. And the cruelest part, Hayden, she wrote, is that you did this after I finally succeeded. If I hadn't pushed you, if I hadn't managed you all these months, you would still be sitting on your sofa, fat and unhappy. I gave you this new body, and you used it to betray me. I read that line. I gave you this new body. I did not feel anger. I did not feel rage. I felt a profound, cold pity. She really believed it. She believed my strength, my work, my sweat, my hours with Lena were all her creation, that she was the director, and I was just the actress she had successfully bullied into shape. I closed the email. I did not reply. I opened my moleskin journal. I wrote, "People will read my story. They will say I am a traitor to my family. They will say I am cold and selfish and ungrateful. But they are wrong. If a family is built on a foundation of humiliation, if it requires one person to be small so the others can feel big, then betrayal is not a sin. Betrayal is the first, necessary, and most loyal act of fidelity to yourself." Life in Chicago went on. The world did not end. A week later, I was in a quarterly review with my boss at Northline, a man named Michael. He was a sharp, no-nonsense managing director who did not care about feelings, only results. At the end of the review, he leaned back. "Your numbers this quarter are up 17%. Willis, best on your team, but that's not what I want to talk about." "Sir?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "I've noticed a change," he said, tapping his pen. 6 months ago, you were the yes woman. You took every extra project. You worked every weekend. You were compliant. This last quarter, you've said no to me 3 times. You said my request for weekend projections was an inefficient use of resources and unnecessary overtime. You said it to my face. I braced myself. "It was," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "The best piece of pushback I've received all year. You were right. It was inefficient. You saved the firm money and my team a weekend. I don't know what changed in your life, but that is executive leadership." He leaned forward. "We're hosting an internal leadership seminar for the junior analysts. Women in finance. I want you to lead a session, not on derivatives. I want you to lead a session on the art of the pushback, setting boundaries in a high-stakes environment." I was speechless. 2 weeks later, I was standing in a conference room. There were 30 young analysts in the room, mostly women in their early 20s. They were all looking at me, hungry for the secret. I told my story, not the whole thing. I told a sanitized corporate version. I talked about reevaluating contracts and managing difficult legacy assets. At the end, during the Q&A, a young woman in the back row raised her hand. She was not asking a question. She was crying. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice thick. This isn't about work, but my mom. She calls me every single day to ask me what I ate. She sends me links to diet programs. She told me I'd never get a promotion if I didn't lose 10 pounds. I thought it was just me. The room was silent. And I looked at this young, brilliant, terrified woman, and I realized what Aunt Karen's email had done for me. My story was not my secret shame. It was not a private, ugly little war. It was a tool. It was a map. And it was my responsibility to share it. That night, I went home. I did not open my journal. I opened a blank document on my laptop. I typed a title that had been burning in my head for a week. My parents demanded I lose weight for my sister's wedding, so I spent $3,900 to miss it entirely. I started to write. I wrote about the Sunday lunch. I wrote about the navy blue shirt. I wrote about the risk factor screenshot. I wrote about the size 6 ultimatum. I wrote about the before and after slideshow. I wrote about my father's silence. I did not exaggerate. I did not embellish. I was Analyst Willis. I just presented the data. I wrote down, fact by fact, exactly what had happened. And as I wrote, I wove in the questions, the ones that had haunted me. What is the cost of keeping the peace? If you are the before picture, who gets to be the after? And the final question? If you were given the choice, would you pay $2,000 to stand in a frame that was built to shrink you? Or would you pay $3,900 to step out of the frame completely? I wrote all night. The words poured out of me. When I typed the last sentence, the sun was just starting to light up the Chicago skyline. I read the whole thing back, and I realized this was the climax. The climax was not the dinner where I walked out. It was not the email from Aunt Karen. It was not even the triumphant click of the confirm payment button. The true climax, the final, real victory, was this moment. Me, in my quiet apartment, at 3 a.m, taking all the pieces of their narrative, the shame, the guilt, the blame, and reforging them into a story that was finally mine. I was no longer the risk factor in their story. I was the protagonist in mine. I took a deep breath. I went to a popular online forum, a place for stories like this. I created an anonymous account. I copied the text. I pasted it. I clicked submit. I shut the laptop. I walked out onto my balcony. The city was waking up. It was cold, and the air smelled like coffee and exhaust. I thought about the word family. For 30 years, it had been a box, a tight, suffocating, perfect frame. Now, I saw it differently. My family was Lena, my trainer. It was Aunt Karen, the black sheep in Portland. It was the crying analyst in the conference room. It was the hundreds of thousands of strangers who would, I hoped, read my story and feel, for a second, what Aunt Karen had given me. You are not crazy. I did a final, quick calculation in my head. The bridesmaid dress, $280, the round-trip flight, $600, the hotel, $400, the gift, $500. If I had gone, I would have spent nearly $1,800 just to buy myself another cycle of shame, just to be their before picture. I smiled, looking out at the city. $3,900, I whispered to the skyline. $3,900 for 3 days in the desert. I did the math on the return on investment. The ROI was the feeling of peace in my own apartment. It was the sleep I got every night. It was the knowledge that my phone was not a bomb. It was the feeling of strength in my legs when I took the stairs. It was, without question, The single best financial deal I had ever made. The Chicago lights glittered, far below. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath of the cold, city air, and I felt my body, this body, not perfect, not a size 6, not finished, but mine, my engine, my asset, my responsibility. It was not a before picture. It was not an after picture. It was, finally, just a picture. I went inside. I opened my moleskin journal for what felt like the last time in this chapter. I wrote one final entry. For the first time in nearly 30 years, I do not have to shrink myself to fit into someone else's frame. If they want me in their picture, they can learn how to build a wider frame. As for me, I am officially outside the lines. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so glad I could share it with you. I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below, so we can connect and share our own thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories and like this video. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help it be heard by more people.